Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Bob's Live. Went to a blank screen there for a couple seconds because I was trying to figure out what in the world is going on with the playback on my phone. It keeps freezing. I think it's just a signal issue with my phone itself because I jumped over to YouTube and the stream looks good there. So, this week, if you've seen the thumbnail or the title, I want to talk about planning your garden. But first, I thought we would head out to the greenhouse and take a look at what's growing. And for this week, I have a little bit different of a greenhouse update because it's from a different location where we actually do some of our growing for what ends up in our stores. So let's head out and take a look at what we have growing in the greenhouse. Hi, today I am doing a little bit different of a greenhouse update. You see, I'm in the greenhouse, but I'm actually up at our Belpre store location. And that's because during the wintertime, we actually use part of this greenhouse for production. So behind me, we have a variety of plants, and these are mostly larger containers. So let's take a look at what we have growing up here. We have these beautiful purple bee balm plants. And these are a perennial, so you can plant these and they'll come back every year, and they attract pollinators. And right beside of them, we have another perennial. This is a perennial dianthus. So we grow dianthus as a bedding plant, but those are annuals. So they die back and they don't come back every year. With these being a perennial, they'll come back year after year. So these are one of my favorite perennials, pincushion plant. And this is a variety called Pink Mist. And we've even got some that are starting to bloom. And also overhead we have hanging baskets, so we have things like spider plants and a few other varieties hanging down through the greenhouse. Of course, these will all get divided up and sent out to the different Bob's Market locations this spring. Alright, right here are some hanging baskets that I've never seen before that I think has some real potential. These are a mix of silver inch plant, bridal veil, and also spider plant. So you get a mix of 3 different types of kind of trailing foliage plants. And with bridal veil, you get some of those cute little blooms too. So yeah, that's pretty cool that we use our Belpre store to grow stuff during the winter. Because otherwise, most of the greenhouse space up there would just be sitting empty for a few months out of the year. So that lets us use the space and get more benefit from it. Of course, you can always follow along with Bob's Market on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And right now, stuff is really starting to bloom in the greenhouse, so I've been trying to do at least a daily Instagram post of some beautiful blooms to kind of get you in the spring spirit. And after this last weekend, hopefully we won't be looking at any more snow. Um, that being said, I headed out to my own garden yesterday evening, and well, really my entire landscape, and took a little stroll around to kind of figure out what I want to do for the upcoming gardening season. And I did that to kind of create a landscaping plan. And if you've followed me over the years, you'll know that a few years ago I had this crazy idea to turn one end of my property into a meadow garden. And well, the first year it sort of looked like this. It was a big rectangle that was just grassy, and yeah, it was kind of cool. The birds really love the grass seed, which I want to encourage more birds and pollinators to come onto my property. Um, but it didn't look very organic. It was just a big boxy rectangle. So something that I want to do is make it look more natural. So the next year, I decided to experiment more with wildflowers. It's hard to see in this aerial image, but I did plant a few patches of wildflowers there. But this was later in the fall and they had already died back. But last year I took it a step further and created an entire wildflower patch in behind my garage. So that added on to the existing meadow. But again, it was kind of this. If you looked at it from the air, it was kind of shaped like the letter D, because the one side was nice and rounded. The other side I just chopped off, even with the existing meadow. So this year I want to do a complete redesign of that area and also expand it. So I'm planning on basically doubling the size of this meadow area. And I've already bought about 10 pounds of wildflower seed. And most of it's perennial seeds. So over the course of the summer, I'm going to talk about kind of the differences that you have when it comes to wildflower seed, and also some of the care for growing wildflowers. So, like this area, you're going to see it in the video here in a little bit, and it is completely mowed down flat right now. And that's because one of the important things with growing wildflowers is actually mowing off the area at the end of the year. That redistributes all the seeds that have been produced during that season, and it also helps break down and get rid of any thatch or overgrowth that could smother those future seeds. A big part of growing a meadow garden is kind of creating a seed bank in the ground. Um, Normally, when you start a meadow garden like this, it's a bad idea to till up the ground really deep because you're pulling up seeds from below the ground. And it's seeds that have been dormant for years. Uh, but you're trying to basically recreate what was originally there with wildflowers. Um, so it takes a few years to kind of charge up that soil with a bank of seeds to kind of keep it coming back every year, if that makes sense. Um, so what I did is I took some photos like this shot, which I took that with my drone. And I also used a combination of Google Maps. And what that let me do is I am not super skilled with uh, like Photoshop or anything like that when it comes to doing a layout. So I actually went the most dead simple route possible. I actually imported the photos that I had into PowerPoint, and in PowerPoint you can make photos sort of transparent so you can see the underlying layers. And then what I started doing was basically drawing over top of that in PowerPoint using preset shapes like squares and rectangles and ovals. And then also they have a freeform tool, so I was able to draw some freeform stuff. But that let me come up with and overall landscaping plan for my entire property. So on this map right here, all the dark green border area, that's all my neighbors' lawns. Um, so it's kind of a combination. I've got like, actually, let's see, one, two, three, four neighbors that butt up against my property. And we don't have any fences between us. We just kind of overlap when we mow a little bit. So over on the far left-hand side there, up at the top, there's a little oval area. That's some crepe myrtles that kind of grow in that area. But the neighbor over there, we just kind of overlap. And what I do is I leave a little buffer there with the meadow garden. So I do mow along that one edge of it. But eventually, I kind of want to plant some plants down along there that'll form a natural screen. Kind of like my neighbor to the south has done. So right here where I have a shed in the backyard, which I'm going to plant some sunflowers there along it this year. But right next to that shed, it might be kind of hard to see, there's some green dots. And those are cedar trees that he's planted that have kind of grown up and created a nice screen between us. So, we don't have a fence, but we do have a little bit of a demarcation there. And yeah, whenever we mow, we just kind of overlap a few stripes and it works out. I've got some really great neighbors. But my neighbor that lives to the south of me, he has a huge field that goes all the way to the railroad tracks, which basically runs along the entire backside of my property, that field does. So the meadow garden is just kind of an extension of that field. In fact, he only cuts that field usually once a year in the fall. So my plan is to basically extend that out into my yard and kind of do a little bit of freeform shape over in the backyard, kind of right here on this side. And then over where I had the original meadow garden over on the far left-hand side, I'm going to bring that all the way back and tie it in. And then the garden is going to be kind of nestled there in the middle of it. So I'm hoping that it's going to create a really nice retreat. And then kind of the yellow area there, part of that is the existing wildflowers from last year. And then the other half of it, I'm going to add on this year. So that's where I do have some tilling to do. But as I said, you don't want to till too deep. So I'm mainly going to be doing it to strip up the upper layer of vegetation. Basically strip the sod off. But yeah, that's my plans for the meadow garden. So let's go ahead and take a look at this plan kind of in video form and walking around and looking at it. This evening we're here at a place where we haven't been for a while, my house. So I thought I would walk around the yard and kind of check on things, but take you along also. We may have just had a snowstorm, but these crocuses are definitely ready for spring. I was also a bit worried about my chrysanthemum, but it looks like it actually survived the winter, so I can get rid of this dead growth and let it start growing and bushing out, and then later on this spring it'll be time to give it its first trim, and then you have to trim it just a couple times throughout the summer. Here along the house, my pansies are starting to come out of their winter slumber, and they're really starting to look beautiful. Over here in the meadow garden, The area where I had wildflowers planted last year is looking pretty good. I'm going to overseed it with some more seed. But then I also have this new area over here that I'm planning on expanding into. And I'm going to have to till that up in the next few weeks once we start getting some drier weather. So my plan is to have a path coming through this way to a seeding area kind of right in this area. And then I'm going to kind of seclude that seeding area with a planting of cosmos and zinnias around it. Last fall, I mowed down the entire meadow garden. And you can still see kind of the outline of the paths. And I'm going to keep the same path layout. But by mowing it down in the fall, that encourages the grass to come back kind of even thicker. So this year I should get some really nice grass growth. But standing here, over there is where the wildflower section is, and it's going to come out this way and kind of arc around. And then I'm going to knock off that straight edge along the backside of the meadow garden and kind of extend it out and around, just to give it a more organic shape. So I'm back here at this far corner of my property, and it actually butts up against this field that belongs to my neighbor. So this year, something that I'm thinking about doing is kind of marrying the two together. So I'm going to have a path that comes from the meadow garden over to here, but I'm going to let this grassy area grow up and kind of blend in with the field next to it. And it's mainly because of the price of gas right now. I'm going to let some of this area kind of return to natural hayfield, and I'm going to mow it a little bit more than the meadow garden. So this might get mowed a couple times a year, but by doing that I can save a ton on gas money and also, to be honest, on work during the summer. Another project that I have this year relates to the garden. Last year I got the raised beds built, but I never got time to get dirt in them and get mulch around it and build a fence and all of that. So I'm planning on doing that this year. And then I also have this area here that I tilled up for row crops. But this is about half the size of the original garden, which you can kind of see the edge of right there. And I'm still kind of working to blend that back into the yard. I sowed grass on that section last year, and it's starting to kind of blend back in. And just like the meadow garden at the far end of the property down there, this area I'm also planning on extending out and kind of marrying into the field behind me. But again, this area I'm going to mow it a little bit more often, but not quite as often as I would if I were mowing it like a lawn. So it's going to be kind of experimental this year, but I think it's going to be worth it from the fuel savings. So we'll see how it looks. And you know, that's the great thing about gardening, is you can experiment with things like this. So that's a quick update of what's happening here in my garden and around my house. And we'll definitely be seeing more throughout this spring and this summer. So if you don't follow Bob's Live, or you're not subscribed to us, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or you can also find Bob's Live over at bobsmarket.com/live. So while I was out walking around, I found some dandelions that were blooming, and I picked these, and I'm going to use them to make some dandelion tea. So a little bit of spring tonic. But yeah, I like dandelion tea. I've also got some roasted dandelion root, so I might actually combine the two. But that would be a nice little warm drink for this evening. Alright, instead of dried dandelion root, I decided to go with some fresh mint that I have growing right in there on my hydroponic system. So I think that'll make a really tasty combo. Oh yeah, that's delicious. So yeah, that was kind of a quick tour around my garden. And as I was showing you before with the, let me find it here, um, with this layout, this is for my entire 1.5 acre lot. So when it comes to planting a garden, this is kind of the big overall plan. When it comes to doing smaller plans, I'm going to use things like my bullet journal. So I oh, I find my mouse here. There we go. So I keep a bullet journal, which is kind of like my brain book. So it has all my to-do lists for the day in it. And I also keep notes in it for different projects. So, and I keep one yearly. So like diagrams of stuff for work and different things like that. It's just a collection of everything. So it's work stuff, home stuff, Bible study notes, all that kind of stuff. I just dump into my bullet journal. And that is another great option for landscape planning. So when I take my big overall plan like this, and I have a key over there to the side, and it's kind of hard to read, but basically the yellow area is wildflowers, but I do have some areas like sunflowers, and then anywhere in purple is annuals. And that's because I'm planning on going with kind of a purple theme this year with my annuals. And you might notice that there's kind of a diagonal cross cut across the property. And that's because of the way my property faces. If you're pulling in onto my street and into my driveway, um, kind of the front of the house is a little bit more formal, and then the backside, um, it's a little bit more wild with the meadow garden and that kind of stuff. I realize I just described that my house is a mullet. It has, business in the front, party in the back. So that's the way I kind of intentionally laid it out. So when you're driving by on the highway looking over at the house, the meadow and all that stuff is kind of hidden. And then when you pull in, you see nice, kind of more formal layout with the annuals. And I've really got to do some work with a couple flower beds and some stonework in the front of the house. Um, but that's still a work in progress, just like the meadow garden is. Um, but when it comes to planning those out, that's when I'm going to pull out like my bullet journal and do a sketch of just that one particular bed and kind of do my plan for it in there. So I can kind of have multiple layers where I'm doing an overall view and then I'm kind of zooming in and doing a close up view. And then also, I get tons of ideas from books. Like, I was just consulting my bookshelf over here. Um, this one is Gardening with Grains by Brie Arthur. I've actually had her on Bob's Live before, but she has some great books on incorporating edibles into your landscaping, and then also like gardening with grains. And that's something that I'm also planning on incorporating eventually into the meadow. Like, hey, maybe I could have a little patch of buckwheat, which I do plant a little bit of buckwheat seed mixed in with the other seeds. Um, but, I could do wheat or different things like that, which, with the costs of some stuff, it might be a good idea to grow some wheat. um, Another place that I get inspiration is online. And we'll jump over. This is our website. And if you head over to our website and take a look at the show notes for tonight's show, I've got 3 different blog posts on there about planning your garden. Because planning is really important when it comes to gardening. Just like anything, you need to plan your work and then work your plan. So this blog post I actually wrote up last year. And I just covered some general tips like, well, for one, keeping a garden journal. So my bullet journal, it acts both as my planner, my garden journal. This is pretty much my brain for the year. I also use this program called Airtables. I use that mainly for my hydroponics system inside to keep it organized. Also taking photos. I shared some photos tonight of my garden in the past. That helps me see what I did and see where I can go from there. And then also things like seed catalogs. That might seem kind of old school, but sometimes it's great to sit down with a catalog, kind of unplug from your phone, and just start jotting down some ideas. And then, like we did tonight, going out and taking a walk and just getting some ideas that way. When it comes to broader ideas, you can always head over to places like Pinterest. Pinterest is an awesome resource for garden ideas. And we have our own Pinterest account. So if you go to pinterest.com/bobsmarket, we have a lot of our blog posts. I need to catch up on posting our blog posts to Pinterest. The recipes, they automatically go there, but blog posts, I have to manually send them over. And of course, I'm not signed in, so that pops up. But we have a number of different boards on Pinterest and a huge number of ideas. And this all links back to our website, which we have our own built-in search function on the website. But yeah, you're welcome to pin some of these ideas to your own boards. but I've got my own Pinterest account and it is full of different gardening ideas. Um, yeah, Petty says that's a great idea. So you know what you need and when to start a project. Um, yeah, journaling, keeping notes is really important. And like I said, the app that I use, it is called Airtables, and I could pull it up here really quick. But it helps me really keep the hydroponic system organized because everything fits into a slot. I'm planning on doing the same thing this year with my raised beds. So I'm going to number the beds, and then I'll know that in bed number one, I have these items and what stage of growth they're in, etc. And yeah, I think the cell service just isn't working too well. I try to stay off the Wi-Fi because I'm broadcasting and don't want to hog it. But yeah, I can't get it to load. I'm just getting a spinny circle. Um, oh, and now I can't find my screen. There we go. So yeah, there are tons of resources when it comes to garden planning, and um, don't hold me to everything that I covered in the video tonight. I tend to get, you know, you know how it is. You start on a project in the summer, you get sidetracked onto another project. At the same time, we're also remodeling our house, so we have projects going on inside. So it's a lot of stuff to juggle. But well, those are my plans and some tips to help you get started with planning. So I recommend going over to our website and checking out the show notes and those articles on planning your garden. And well, until next time, keep growing.